Okay, I'm going to very quickly introduce the moderator for this next stage of the morning's event. Brittany Fremion is an assistant professor at the Central Michigan University. She is an environmental oral historian, and among other things, she has been doing oral histories with residents of Michigan who experienced the PBB crisis and its aftermath. So she is going to be the moderator for the next session here. So Brittany.
All right. Oh, good. It's on. I am so honored to be here in the company of so many community members and researchers and public officials who have dedicated their lives to addressing large-scale chemical contaminations, not only in our state, but across the country. So thank you so much for all of your work and advocacy and efforts. It's just phenomenal and so necessary. I'm delighted to introduce two individuals who have played a really important role in addressing contamination in the state of Michigan over the past 40-some years. Francis Bus Spaniola represented Shiawassee County in the Michigan House of Representatives from 1975 to 1990. He's actually the individual, the representative who has been the longest serving representative in that area and in Michigan history. So that's a wonderful thing to have had an advocate serving for that long for Michigan communities. He sponsored the legislation which lowered the PBB levels, instituted a public health study regarding the human health impact of PBB, and provided low to no interest loans to PBB distressed farmers. I've had the opportunity to talk to a number of farmers who have actually mentioned how critical all of those have been and remain to them. So among many awards, the Booth newspapers named him one of Michigan's 10 best legislators in 1978. He's Legislator of the Year by the Michigan Association of Regions in 1986 and the Legislative Leadership Award by the Area Agency on Aging, Region 1B in 1989. He's a native of Corona, Michigan, a graduate of Corona High School and Michigan State University, where he earned a BA in political science. He did his graduate work at MSU as well, and was a fellow at the Robert Taft Institute of Government at MSU. In addition to these accolades, he's a former commissioned officer in the United States Army. He's taught history, yay, and government at high schools in East Lansing, Durand, and Corona. He was appointed by Governor Jennifer Granholm to serve 2 years on the Library of Michigan Board of Trustees and Michigan Judges Retirement Board. He served on the staff of U.S. Senator Donald Regal and was a member of the board and president of the Friends of Michigan History and Commander Region 9 of the Military Order of the World War. So he is a very distinguished individual, and thank you, Bus, for being here today. He's joined by his son, Tony, who is an attorney and partner in the firm that he founded with Bob Ufer in 1987, Ufer, Spaniola, and Frost. His practice is focused on the representation of corporate and other business entities in a number of contexts. Tony has previously been active in politics and government, and you'll hear today some more about how he helped his father run successful campaigns for the Michigan House of Representatives and has worked for various other government officials, including the Secretary of Transportation for the state of Massachusetts. He also is a former news reporter and radio announcer, which I was delighted to hear. In the wake of Michigan's PBB public health crisis, Tony initiated legislation that helped to create the Michigan Cancer Registry to promote and facilitate epidemiological research in the state. In 2004, he served as a legal work group advisor to the Governor's Commission on Mental Health. And most recently, those of you who were here for the documentary last night, No Defense, you know that he has been very involved in advocating for community members in Oscoda County and across the state, across the country, who are dealing with PFAS contamination. So thank you, Tony, for being here as well. Okay, Bus, can I start with you? Alrighty. I wondered if you would be willing to talk a little bit about your involvement in the efforts to address PBB contamination in the 1970s. In particular, as I mentioned, you're credited with encouraging the the state to lower the PBB levels, as well as initiate a long-term health study and provide critical financial assistance to farmers. How did you decide to tackle these issues, and how did you go about it?
Thank you very much. I hope you can all hear me out there. Well, to be brutally honest with you, when I was elected to the legislature in November 1974 and took office the 1st of January 1975, I didn't even know what PBB was. Hadn't heard of it, and I come from an agricultural district. And didn't hear about it in the campaigns, and I honestly tried very hard to be up to date on the issues, and I was unaware of it. But I was appointed to the Agriculture Committee of the House of Representatives, which was chaired by a couple of other Democrats, if you will, so you know what my politics were. And these two guys were farmers. And one was a man by the name of Don Albasta, and the other one was a man by the name of Paul Porter. And they were co-chairs of that committee. And it's because of the activities on that committee that I became knowledgeable about the problem. But Representative Albasta at that time took the lead in opening up the PBB issue, and had a number of public hearings across the state. And by the way, we had a lot of difficulty getting those off the ground for all kinds of political reasons, which we do not have time for here. But in any event, I attended those meetings and listened to the quote experts, and I listened very, very carefully to those people who were considered non-experts, and interestingly enough, the ones that were affected by it, who were told they didn't know what they were doing, okay? And as I went across the state and listened to both sides, it became very clear to me who was telling the truth. And frankly, it wasn't the experts. Excuse me. It wasn't that they were bad people, but they were people who were trying to protect their jobs. And they were influenced by, you name it, money, whatever, okay? Well, anyway, I went to hearings. Of course, my son attended many of them with me, my wife as well. And what really opened the door, what opened my eyes, I should say, is listening to the ordinary folks, if that's a proper term, telling about their problems. And you know that it was such a serious problem and no one was listening to them, that on Sundays when they knew I was at home, people that were not constituents of mine would come to my door, and they would come in with their families and they would tell stories that were so sad that, I, honest to God, cried many times. Well, I got very interested in the issue. Representative Albasta was obviously leading the pack at this particular stage, and he decided to run for U.S. Congress. And then there was a split within our own party, and it fell on me actually to take up the fight. And that's how I got involved. And of course, as you well know, you've heard all about the problems before, but I saw them face to face and heard these people, and I want to tell you something. It had a profound impact on me. Listen sometimes to those people who are supposedly not the experts. I'm telling you, it had an impact on me, a big one, and that's how I got involved.
Yeah, I think that is really important, that you helped to kind of amplify those community voices, and you really heard and responded to the concerns that you heard. Okay, so Tony, you were a young adult when your father spearheaded these efforts to address PBB contamination. In what ways do you think that his work on that issue affected you? In particular, how PBB might have informed your decision to work with the Cancer Registry and now with PFAS.
Well, thank you. What I saw when I was 18 years old, trailing around with my dad in the state was, as he said, the stories were just horrible. Real life people who were just suffering terribly, and not only, in many cases, the farmers, they were losing their livelihood, they were ill, they were sick, and on top of it all, they had people from our state agencies telling them they were all crazy. Hypochondriacs, psychosomatic, just some of the most disgusting things I've ever seen in my life. And to hear, there's one particular time I went with my dad up to Cadillac for a hearing, and the farmers, one by one, stood up and started telling, just awful things that were happening to them. And the state folks would say, oh, we don't see any evidence of anything. And, I was no expert in any regard, but it just made no sense why people would go up and humiliate themselves in front of a large crowd of people and for glory. They were called glory seekers. It was amazing. And I remember the stories. I remember one man in particular outside the hearing, actually in the restroom, and he pulled up his shirt sleeves and showed me these lumps around his elbows, and then pulled up his pant legs and showed me lumps around his knees, and he said, those aren't in my head. That's stuck with me my entire life. And it was an amazing opportunity for a young man to be able to see this. We went to all sorts of hearings all over the place, but then 40 years later to find out that my family has been impacted by PFAS and we can't drink our water, all of that informed everything I've done ever since. That perspective, I think, guides everything that I do.
Okay, so we've got a few minutes left. I wanted to ask you both what you think the most important lessons you've learned from both the PBB episode and or PFAS might be.
Well, one of the things I learned that I'm not too happy with is that we don't learn much. Yogi Berra said it well. It's like deja vu all over again. For God's sake, we should have been prepared at least to deal with this second round, as I call it, in a little different fashion than we have. And it would seem to me that we would have learned something about how to deal with the people that, the experts that attack the other experts that are telling the truth. And it would seem to me that we would also learn something about political action. And if there's anything that I see that's not being addressed today, is how to take what you know and what you know from the experts and how to take that and to turn it into a political weapon, if that's the proper term, to get the people in public office who will make the difference to do something. And if there's anything that frustrates the living daylights out of it, it's that we haven't learned how to do that. We haven't learned how to do that. Where are we? As one old man who used to come into my dad's store would say, what do you hear from your head? Okay? And for crying out loud, is pure water and pure food a political issue? It's not a partisan issue. And we need to take people, have people like you become equipped not only to deal with the issue itself, but to deal with the politics of the issue effectively.
Well, so following on that, I'm in my family's place that's impacted by PFAS is in a little tiny town. St. Louis, you guys we're right with you. Same size pretty much. No media, no coverage, no nothing for 7, 8, 9 years. And so when I learned that we were impacted, I knew immediately from the PBB experience, because what happened with PBB was all political. It was political pressure that forced things to happen. It took too long, as my friends in St. Louis know all too well, but that's what made the difference. And so I hear people in the PFAS world saying, oh, don't get political about this. I say baloney. It's all political. The only way we're going to make things happen is to force legislation through Congress, to force the regulators to take action. And as Michelle Marcus said earlier, we all need to come together because we're in this together. Little tiny towns like St. Louis and Oscoda and Grayling and Alpena, you know, separately we're not much, but together we're a powerhouse. And so that's what I learned from PBB, and that's what we all need to learn as we move forward, particularly this afternoon when we can all get together and powwow and figure out how to tackle this stuff.
Thank you both for your past work and your ongoing work. I think we have a little bit of time for some questions.
So we have a few minutes for questions for any of us. And again, if we get questions, Brittany, if you would repeat them.
Sure.
Yep, right here.
Okay.
Right here.
Hi, I'm Teresa Landrum and I'm from Southwest Detroit. My question is, we know that this issue is widespread. How do we get our legislatures to move? Because we've been working hard and they seem to ignore it. They no longer work for us. It seems like we work for them. And it's been a difficult situation. And this bipartisanship is breaking us down, and this is life or death. And that's the challenge we have with our own legislatures that we've elected to protect us.
I agree. I agree, Teresa. And the question is, what do we do to get our legislators to act? And because it's been a long time and it doesn't seem like things are happening. And I'm with you there 10,000%. In Oscoda, we've been at it 10 years. 10 years. We don't even have a plan to clean it up. And so all we can do is to come together, find those people in the legislature who will listen to us, because they are there. I mean, Winnie Brinks from Grand Rapids is fantastic on this issue, and just one of many people. Our congressional folks, you find those levers to pull, and then you join together as communities and with them to partner. And we've done that in Oscoda. We have a long ways to go, but we want to partner with you in Detroit. Monica Luce-Patrick has been up to our community, and we're going to keep fighting. So let's get together and talk some more.
You know, if I may, as individuals, you're far more powerful than you think politically. And let me tell you from my own experience. Well, let me back up just one step and say something that I did learn in Lansing. I'm not sure I like it, but you know what's most important to a legislator? Get reelected. Okay? So you take that and you use it. What worked with me particularly was when ordinary folks would come to my office and sit down and tell me their story. And if it registered as being legit, it stuck there. And I was telling someone earlier today, those individual visits may not seem that important to you, but to me it registered here. And every day when I went on the floor to deal with the legislation that was scheduled that day, I'd look at the list of things that were on the agenda, and I would look down there and see there's an issue that, a couple of my constituents came and talked to me about. I'd go pull the file, I'd take it down to the floor with me, and listen, it had an impact. Because I believed those people, okay? And I also knew if I responded to them, they would talk to other people and maybe help me get reelected, okay? Okay? It's not as tough as you think. And I was telling someone earlier here, and I'll wrap up very quickly. You know, all the scientific information that you get is very important. But you need to have a couple of meetings like this to talk about how to be effective politically, because that's where the answer is here. That's why we keep seeing this stuff over and over again, and people making the same mistakes over and over again. You're more powerful than you think. Believe me. Believe me.
I'm here to tell you that it's a great thing that you feel that you need to build solidarity among people who are impacted by PFAS and PBB. But I'm also here to tell you that as someone who is from the Middle East, I'm telling you the problem with contamination caused by U.S. military bases is not restricted to the United States. It is actually a massive global problem. The research I've done in the past few years shows that one military base in Iraq, which we had access to because there's 500 of them and there is no access to them, we have shown that there is a link between distance to the military base and occurrence of birth defects and level of thorium in blood of children. So what you do here, I think your agenda should be to confront and force U.S. Department of Defense to clean up the mess that it leaves all over the world. The anger towards the United States is rooted in the fact that many millions of people's lives have been turned around and destroyed by the fact that the U.S. is militarily present in multiple places. Thank you for your work.